you remember the Promise of Legalization. You remember it, right? Or has it not hit your state yet? The green rush, printing gold, this new billion-dollar industry that was supposed to be built on freedom, fairness, and a tidal wave of tax money. We saw news anchors celebrating, the politicians cutting ribbons, and those long lines outside the first shiny dispensaries when sales began. This was supposed to be the end of the black market. What happened? For thousands of legal cannabis businesses, that dream has become a complete regulatory nightmare. And it's not because they're being outcompeted. It's because they're being regulated to death while competing with people that have no or little regulations. The legal flower and vape market, once pitched as this golden opportunity, is being systematically strangled, letting loopholes and illicit sales thrive. And the killer isn't this lack of demand. Cannabis is extremely popular. The killer is the very rule book that was designed to control it. The policies that were supposed to create a safe, legal market are doing the exact opposite. They're sending them right back to their local plug that they were supposed to be replacing. Or now they're giving them loophole options on the internet or their local smoke shop. When states started legalizing cannabis way back, almost 15 years ago now, the vision was clear. It was seductive. It was this picture of responsible entrepreneurs finally stepping out of the shadows and into the light. It was a promise for safe, tested products for everyone. And then a promise of social equity to help fix the damages from the failed war on drugs. It really looked like it was working. But if you look after 2020 to today, you'll see the cracks breaking the foundation and bringing change. This industry is facing what I can only describe as a quiet collapse. We're seeing businesses drowning in debt, and they're coming due next year, laying off thousands of people, putting their licenses up for sale, shutting the doors for goods in mature markets and in new ones from coast to coast. And it's completely self-inflicted by the regulations that created it. This isn't a story about failing product. The demand for cannabis has never been higher. Some estimates put the total U.S. cannabis market at 60 billion, but the legal regulated market captures only about half. So if the businesses aren't failing because people stop buying weed, what's going on? Well, the answer is as infuriating as it is absurd. The government, in its attempt to control the industry or ignore it, has created a system so burdensome, so expensive, and so contradictory that the laws themselves are their own worst enemy. The legal market is being crushed under the weight of its own bureaucracy, its absurd federal policy that openly flouts itself with a loophole letting marijuana sold from coast to coast online unless you light it on fire, and an absurd federal policy that openly flouts itself with a loophole letting marijuana be something totally different under federal law until you spark the joint. To understand the slow motion collapse that's been going on for the past 5 years, we need to break it down. Let's look at the three main weapons that regulations are using to kill legal cannabis: the crushing taxes, the regulatory chaos, and a complete lack of federal support, even federal confusion that undermines the licensed industry in the states that have systems. Let's get into the taxes. Everyone knew that legal cannabis would be taxed, but nobody expected the tax rates would be so high they'd make it impossible to compete. In some states, when you combine state, local, and special excise taxes, the price of legal cannabis can be 45% or more over its illicit market equivalent. In California, some estimates suggest that the illegal market is twice the size of the legal one, pulling in nearly $8 billion a year. Why? Because it doesn't have to charge customers a 38% tax. Think about that. Why would you buy a product that's nearly identical to another product for almost double the price? Nobody would do that. Well, I mean, some people might, but very few. People in my state of Illinois drive to Michigan to avoid paying a 35% tax on the legal vapes sold at licensed dispos in Illinois. For years, this problem has been made exponentially worse by a tiny piece of the federal tax code, Section 280E. Because cannabis is a Schedule I drug, the same as heroin, still, right now, 2025, under federal law, legal cannabis companies were banned from deducting normal business expenses: rent, payroll, electricity, marketing. You can't deduct any of it. How expensive would your price of your Starbucks coffee be if that Starbucks was told it had to pay its taxes on gross revenue without first subtracting the cost of ordinary expenses like like beans or baristas or its lease. Starbucks would either be out of business or they would jack their prices as high as they could get away with. And that's what's happening in the legal cannabis industry for the past few years. And since the 2018 Farm Bill, it's only gotten harder for the licensed shops because the same federal law that punishes marijuana companies benefits hemp companies for products for identical uses, except that hemp is mostly a semi-synthetic version of the more harshly regulated natural product. They take CBD isolate and spin it back into L-9. Now, there might be a glimmer of hope here. The federal government has finally proposed reclassifying cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. I'm not saying that's 100% what's going to happen. We don't really know under this new federal regime, which just is a surprise every day. But when this is finalized, which may be in 2025, it will get rid of the 280E problem, and that'll be a huge relief. But it's not a silver bullet. The state level taxes are very high, cripplingly high, and in some places they're going up. The second weapon is regulatory chaos. Okay, let's get into the main event here, because the feds only gave the production of half of hemp laws and kept marijuana Schedule 1. There's not one set of rules for cannabis federally. There's cannabis before it's on fire and after it's on fire. And then there are dozens of state laws that change how cannabis is regulated depending on what state you're in, and they can't do interstate commerce. This patchwork creates an operational nightmare for business owners trying to expand their operations outside their state lines, or even to do business inside their state lines. The insane cost of licensing, mandatory product testing, high-tech security. Our vault door is 25 frickin' large. On top of that, in many places, local governments can just ban cannabis shops entirely, leaving these huge cannabis deserts where the only option is the illicit or loophole market, and then saturated areas where compliance and the loophole market take their slice of that total addressable market, or TAM, pie. These hurdles create an environment where only the biggest, best funded companies or the most sophisticated operators can survive. And even they can go out of business, especially the independent entrepreneurs that legalization was supposed to empower through licensed ownership limits so common throughout state has legalized. And finally, this third weapon, it's a complete lack of federal support. Even with cannabis rescheduling on the horizon, it is still federally illegal for recreational use and for any use for right now. This has one massive consequence. Cannabis industry is literally money laundering under the law until they move it out of Schedule 1. Most legal cannabis businesses can't get normal bank accounts. They can't accept credit cards. They can't get business loans. And they're forced to operate almost entirely in cash and forced to pay over $1,000 a month for a simple bank account. And after you find one of the few state chartered bank accounts that will provide what they call that bank account or treasury services, you can't get anything else. No credit. Only about 8% of the banks actually bank cannabis. So there's piles of cash, which makes these dispensaries huge targets for violent crime and robberies. Hence the $25,000 vault door. And there's a bill called Safer Banking Act that may try to help fix this, providing banks a safe harbor to work with state legal cannabis businesses. It's passed the House multiple times, but it always dies in the Senate. And as of mid-2025, it has not even been reintroduced in this Congress. A bipartisan group of 32 state attorney generals is pleading with Congress to pass it. And it points to risks of public safety, and its fate is uncertain as the redefinition of hemp. What are the real world results of these disastrous policies? Let's break down the consequences. There are three big ones: the explosion or the perpetuation of the illicit market, the death of small businesses, and a trail of broken promises. The number one beneficiary of overregulation is the illicit market. It is the direct, logical, and entirely predictable outcome of bad policy that prohibits interstate commerce in this crop. The black market doesn't pay excise taxes. It will ship its product interstate. It doesn't pay expensive licenses. It doesn't pay for security. Okay, maybe they have guns. They shouldn't. It's another crime. It doesn't follow zoning laws, so it can easily undercut the prices of legal shops. In states like New York and California, illegal shops and delivery services outnumber the legal ones. The government basically created the perfect conditions for a black market to thrive, defeating the entire purpose of legalization. The illicit market uses the hemp market to put a wrapper of gray area legitimacy and move all sorts of product nationwide, even inverting the product into licensed operators in states such as New York and Missouri. The second consequence is the death of the small business owner that the license limits created by the state laws were supposed to support courts and enrich. You had this promise of legalization. You were going to be one of the few that had a license. There are limits on how many licenses you can own, and you take out private loans. You spend years fighting through a maze of applications. You stack all the chips that you can, and finally you get open with everything in hock. And now your prices are 40% higher than the illegal plug in town or the gray market smoke shop that your state has done nothing to curtail. You can't deduct your expenses, so your tax bill is astronomical. You operate in fear of being robbed because you're forced to handle more cash than the average retail location. That's the reality of thousands of small operators, and there's only about 15,000 dispensaries in the whole United States. Many of them are mom and pop operators. They're small because of all these license limits and because how difficult it is to get licensed in a particular jurisdiction. Now, not all of them are losing money, but a lot of them are losing money. And the reason that is happening has to do mostly with the federal law because there's not a uniform market for this. It all leads back to those unfulfilled promises. The huge tax revenues that the states were counting on fall short of these projections sometimes because the market is still illegal or in a loophole that just pays sales taxes. The social equity programs designed to give a foothold to the communities harmed by the war on drugs? Yeah, good luck with that. How are those doing? Some people hate them politically, and then other people don't like them because of the abuse of the social equity applicants that have happened. So this whole vision of safe, equitable, prosperous, legal market, that's almost pie in the sky, fairy dust that they told the legislatures to be able to get the law passed. So what now? The situation seems absurd because it is. We have a legal industry that is being regulated so poorly that it's losing a fight against a very illegal alternative it was meant to replace. And this just isn't a business problem. It's a massive failure of public policy at the federal level. The path forward requires a radical rethinking of how we regulate cannabis. First, taxes need to be lowered to a reasonable level that lets legal businesses actually compete on price with the illicit market. Second, that illicit market needs to be nixed by a federal market so that they don't have to go to an illicit market because now cannabis is Schedule 3 nationwide. That's when we need regulations because the hemp that people are eating and the Schedule 3 marijuana, they still won't be compliant with the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So we need to create a new regulatory rubric that treats all THC the same. Now, that means, critically, Congress must act. Passing the Safe Banking Act doesn't really cut it after Schedule 3. And with the hemp loophole, again, we need comprehensive cannabinoid legislation to govern THC or CBD or natural cannabinoids for human consumption. It would immediately solve the cash problem, reduce the illicit market by creating a national market, and give businesses the access to capital they need to grow. The promise of a safe and legal cannabis market isn't lost, but it sure is stalled. However, pressure is building like a kidney stone that's about to get passed. It won't be comfortable, but it will be much better after it's out of the system. This isn't a partisan issue. It's a common sense one. It's about letting legal businesses all legal cannabis businesses without any loopholes, ensuring public safety, and actually delivering on the promises that were made when all this started decades ago. But what do you think? Is this the right move to regulate an out-of-control market, or is it a death blow to small businesses and consumer choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Folks, this isn't a fight about an abstract piece of art. It's your neighbors, it's your job, it's your state's budget, and it's your right to safe, affordable cannabis. Help us push this channel past 100,000 subscribers so we can drag these facts onto every desk in Congress. Smash that subscribe button and share this video with one person who still thinks dispo weed sucks. And then stay tuned to the next video starting now.